show. Call for your cum, I be checking through the peephole. Everything closed this late, but your contact.
Hey guys, I'm Si. This is Ace Podcast Nation. Welcome back. We're here at A.C.E Media again for another episode of My Story, and I am delighted to be joined by former Surrey and Glamorgan cricketer and of course author, Mr. Mark Frost. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good, and nice to meet you, Simon,
Indeed.
on your podcast.
Thank you very much. So obviously I think we'll start with cricket, but I'm kind of interested in the early days of my guests as well. Tell us a little bit about the very early days of kind of life for Mark Frost as a child, growing up.
So I grew up in the West Midlands, in Tipton and Wolverhampton, and three brothers, so we all played cricket in the back garden. My dad played, and one of my best friends at school introduced me to the local cricket club at the age of 9, and suddenly started playing hardball cricket, and I learnt all my cricket really through that junior section in that little bit of the West Midlands there, and grew up in that area, and then eventually made the way into playing Birmingham League cricket, which was the best standard of league cricket in the West Midlands at the time. Played some minor counties cricket for Staffordshire, and eventually went to Durham University as well, although I went there to read geography as opposed to play cricket like some people did. So.
Oh, cool. So was it always cricket for you? Was that your sport, or was there other sports?
So I played soccer. I wasn't very good at soccer, but I kept goal, so I could sort of dive around and sometimes catch the ball.
Yeah.
I played soccer till I was about 23, something like that. Mainly because people didn't want to have a playing goal, so I said I'd do it. And,
just kind of jump in there.
Put the green top on and away you went. Yeah, but it was mainly cricket, really.
Was cricket something that you were naturally good at, or did you have to work hard at it in the kind of to pick it up and things like that?
I found I was naturally good at bowling, so from an early age I knew I could bowl quite quickly, compared to others, and I just fell in love with the sport, the whole rhythm of it, the story that it tells, particularly the longer version of it, the Test matches, and got amazed by the stars of the day, and watching the great players of that day, and it was pretty much on telly all the time as well, whether it's Test matches or the old Sunday League, the old Tron Player League. So you got to know a lot of players quite well. I didn't go to too many games myself at the time. I went to watch Worcestershire a few times at Dudley Cricket Club, and then Warwickshire at Edgbaston, because they were the nearest. Very occasionally to New Road, to Worcester, but yeah, that was my background in cricket, really.
Yeah, cricket was so accessible. Like when I was a young kid, I remember watching, all the Test matches would be on BBC, and it was so accessible that, like you said, you knew all the players, and I think that's one of my real frustrations with. As I see, like my kids now are 18, 16, 14, and they don't really have an interest in cricket other than they might watch it if it's on, sort of me and my father-in-law might be watching it or something like that. And that's my kind of one disappointment with that, because I think it's not as accessible on TV if you haven't got Sky and BT and the things like that, which we haven't always had. So I think it's not as accessible. And when I look back to my childhood, it was very easy to watch top level cricket.
I mean, it's improved a little bit in the last couple of years with the 100. So with my work, I've been very involved with the 100, and that's just finished yesterday at Surrey Glamorgan. So the fact that BBC Two are now showing cricket as well as Sky is a real step forward as well, and particularly good for so many girls and women to see the game on telly, on the evening at tea time. And actually to see professional women playing cricket, it's a fantastic role model for so many youngsters now.
Yeah, 100%. I think being on terrestrial TV is a massive thing, and I think it makes a massive difference because. So I'm a massive follower of most sport, football, cricket. I don't really follow women's football at all, even in the Women's World Cup now. I haven't really got into it too much. Whereas women's cricket, my kids, they will watch it. My kids' girlfriends will watch it because it's on TV, and even if they're not cricket fans already, it's something that appeals to them and something that they can resonate with, I think, ultimately. And I really enjoy the women's cricket, whereas I think if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I think I probably would have said, no, I probably wouldn't watch that.
Well, the standard has certainly increased,
absolutely.
for sure. And you've got some fantastic cricketers. You look at someone like Tanny Bowman, who scored that 100 a week ago, absolutely,
unreal,
fizzing the game for girls to watch. And I think this year has been a pivotal year where, with the 100, your ticket gets to the women's game and the men's game, and a lot of people would just come for the men's game, the second game in the evening. And now more than half people are coming to watch the women's game. So yesterday we had 7,500 at Sophia Gardens, a crowd of 11,000. So most people are saying actually both games are worth watching.
Yes.
And they've been exciting. I mean, we've had, 2 or 3 games, literally last ball thrillers.
Oh yeah, the one which was tied the other day.
Yeah, the men had a tied game. And that's really what that competition is doing, is reaching out to people who've never really considered cricket. It's reaching out particularly to girls to think, actually, that's a sport for me. And it's making it much more accessible and giving people a dream of maybe they could be out there on that big stage one day in the future as well.
So, do you think, obviously Tammy Beaumont, I think scored 100 the other day, didn't she, in the 100? And then obviously she scored 200, I think, for England in the summer in the test. Was it a test match or was it it was a test match. She scored 200, wasn't it?
You're not talking to the right person. I'm not a big analyst,
okay.
So don't ask me for stats.
No,
I know she's a fantastic player and a brilliant. She's so full of energy when you meet her as well. She's so bubbly and energetic. So it's great to see the effect that she's playing, and I really hope that she gets back into that England one-day squad, and I'm pretty sure with recent innings she will do.
Yeah, and I think, look, ultimately, I know there's detractors of the 100 and things like this, but I think, particularly on the women's side, but also in the men's side, is if you can get kids who they kind of get into it in that short form, they'll follow players. So I saw some young girls yesterday with T-shirts saying "We love Zach Crawley." Just 3 girls. I think they probably were somewhere between, I don't know, 9 and say 13.
Yeah.
But they obviously are a big, that's their player or whatnot. Yeah. So they are more likely to follow him wherever he goes. So they'll watch him in the test matches. They'll watch him everywhere. And I think that's the same for Tammy Beaumont and the same for any other player. The short form, I think there's a place for all of it. Even though my favourite form of cricket is still Test cricket, because I think no other form of cricket provides that level of Test.
Well, if you look at the Ashes series this year, fantastic spectacle of skill over a long game, the longest game possible. But you've got any variation that you want. There's no restrictions, whereas in the short game there's tons of restrictions in terms of fielding and where you can bowl and bat and all that. But it's really captured the nation again, hasn't it? That story, lots of little sub-stories, like the Johnny Bairstow thing, but it just ramped it all up, and ramp is a good word because everyone's playing all these amazingly new shots and pretty effectively now, so that there's never a dull session. When I went to see my first Test match, I was probably 10 or 11, a long time ago at Edgbaston. These were the days you didn't need a ticket; you could just pay your money on the day, and England was something like 167 for 6 after the first full day. Well, that would be like just after lunch nowadays, 160. So the game has massively changed, and I think it's really complementing where the 100 is now to reach out to that new audience and to make sure that as many, what I would like to do in my role now, which is I'm responsible for all our grassroots work across Wales, which is that every girl and boy in Wales actually seriously considers cricket. It's not just some, or those that have a mum or dad that were involved in it, or a best mate, like I was, hundreds of years ago.
Through people,
but actually, everyone thinks, I'll give cricket a go. I'll give it a whirl and see if I like it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's so important for the future of cricket. And I know, so when I was a teenager, so you're talking 90s. We used to play 20 over cricket as kids, and then you'd play sort of 50 or 40 over cricket with the seniors. But I know now they play, or they certainly in recent years they've been doing 20 over cricket in the men's as well. Yeah. They have 20 over tournaments and stuff like that. Do you think at some point we'll see the 100 format in like the village clubs and kids at levels and things like that?
You may do. I mean, anyone that's run any junior cricket on a cool summer's evening on a Thursday night knows that you need to get through the game quite quickly, and so people have been innovating with bowling 10 overs from one end and 10 overs from another end, so you don't have so many changeovers. And that's what the 100 has done, the countdown cricket. It means that you have fewer changeovers so that there's less standing around really, and the game moves on quickly. So it may well be the whole idea of that second innings being a simple countdown. You've got 50 balls left and you've got to score 83 runs. It's very simple. It's really easy to understand. I mean, you've got all the stats there for the real, people who love all the other numbers and the partnerships and who did what and the averages and that. But one of the classic things that somebody who's not au fait with cricket will say halfway through a game, they'll say, "Who's winning?"
Yes.
You say, "Well, it's not like that because not everyone's had their go at batting." But like in soccer or rugby, if you're 3-1 ahead, you're winning 3-1, aren't you?
Of course, yeah.
But it doesn't mean you're going to win.
No.
And whilst it's a bit of a gimmick, in the 100 now we have this winometer, which is every now and again it pops up to say that Welsh Fire are 67% likely to win, and it's just a bit of fun in between, the breaks of play. But it's making the game real and understandable to people so that people can get it and pick it up straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. When we went, me and my father-in-law went to watch the Fire Saturday before last, and the women's. We wanted to be down for the women's game because we followed the Welsh Fire, both men and women, and we had said because it was a Saturday, we kind of expected there'll be a few in for the start of the women's, but mostly people will sort of drip through throughout the day. But actually, we were surprised at how many people were there for the women's game at the start.
Yeah.
And by I think probably 20 minutes into the women's game, there was even more. Like it really filled up quick.
Yeah.
There was a lot of families there. There was a lot of. I thought the guy had his microphone. I forget his name. But in between the balls, you have the guy with the microphone who goes around the crowd and he's getting the kids involved. All the kids love that. Even the kids on the other side of the ground, who can see the kids, being interviewed and who's going to win, Welsh Fire and this, that, and the other. All of those little things will make those kids keep coming back and hopefully take that love of cricket into their teens. And
you've got someone like him doing that. You've also got Lauren Jenkins, who's well known in Welsh media. That presentation, cricket, like a lot of sports have said, we're going to put the women's and the men's game shoulder to shoulder. So the way it looks, the feel, the presenters, a lot of my colleagues at Glamorgan have been working very hard to make sure that experience when you go to Sapphire Gardens is makes you feel welcome and you feel at home. So the facilities, the buildings, the welcome from stewards and volunteers, the stuff you see on the screen, the presenters, it reflects the community that we live in.
Absolutely.
Whilst we have a museum in Glamorgan, and I know the curator there is trying to make a lot of changes there, the museum reflects what went on in the past, and it's a bit too blokey and dads and lads, and now if you look at the growth of the game, the girls and women's membership of cricket clubs, for example, is like a perfect sales reps curve. They're really steep, going up every year. There's more and more clubs. In fact, last year was the first year that we had more than 50% of cricket clubs in Wales with some sort of female offer, be it a girls or a women's team. And we know that's ahead of the curve compared to England, for example. So we're really proud of that, but we want to take it even further. We're really ambitious that every club in Wales has a girls and boys, women and men option. In fact, men's cricket isn't technically men's cricket, it's open cricket. Anyone can play it. women's cricket is women's cricket.
Yeah.
And the game is finding its way as to what are the best formats, like you were talking about before, to suit gender, age, ability. But the game is constantly evolving to make itself relevant and real and exciting to people.
I'll put you on the spot a little bit. When the 100 format first was about and rumoured about and came about, were you, as a fan of, someone who's a fan of Test cricket as well, were you and someone who's played cricket as well, were you a sort of a fan of it instantly? Were you a bit sceptical, or were you kind of brought around to it? Where did you stand in those early days on it?
So I guess a lot of people were wary about, do we need another format, another short format? We've got 20 over cricket, we've got 50 over cricket, and then 3-day for county championship, or 4-day, sorry, and test matches. But the piece of research that was done just ahead of the 100 coming out, researched thousands of 16 to 25-year-olds about their awareness, their visibility, what was cricket about, what were the perceptions of cricket, and it was really negative, unfortunately, really negative. And when the first joint strategy for cricket was rolled out through a series of seminars across Wales, we played this video, and I could sort of sense people thinking, oh, the 100, we need this. So I played this little 4-minute clip, and it was really sobering for people to think, wow, that young people are growing up with no awareness of cricket or its excitement, for example. So just in the last month, going to watch Welsh Fire and sitting in the stands, and I've sort of wandered around the stadium, and last night I was right at the top of the main grandstand, and just getting a feel for it. And it was fantastic to see so many young families, young people, young women in groups going out to watch the game, and it's absolutely done what it said on the tin, as it were, in terms of reaching out to that sort of 16 to 25-year group and young families. With that comes a bit of a challenge, because sometimes you get groups who want to have a pretty noisy, beery type of experience as well, so you do need to separate people from time to time. But other than that, it's been fantastic. So it's very different. It's the fast food option of cricket, but it's working at the moment. And the way that the game is going, if you look at all the main formats of the game, the independent franchise style, like the Indian Premier League, like the 100, is going to become the predominant form of cricket, with Test match cricket, certain formats of Test match cricket, like the Ashes, obviously will always be a big one, but Test match cricket will have to evolve as well, probably.
Yeah, I think obviously we saw things like day-night tests and things like that over the years. I think they will have to make some changes. Do you know, on that, just made me go completely off my next question to think of something else. There was a point in the Ashes where they came off for light, and I think they also, England were forced to bowl spin at a time when they needed wickets. In terms of Test cricket evolving, do you think things like a pink ball, for instance, where they can play, if it gets up to a certain light meter, or at a certain light, where it's getting a bit tricky, but the actual weather is okay? Do you think there's things like they could bring in, turn the floodlights on and obviously get the pink ball involved, or do you think that's something which...
Well, that has happened. I mean, we've had sort of day-night test matches where they've started in the afternoon, finished in the evening. We have had some, I think, orange or pink ball.
But I think, more matches. In terms of, so you said just a regular test match, but then say you get to 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's a bit murky, and could they then implement that where because they change the balls if it goes out of shape and things like this? So
look, the game is I don't know whether it's right or wrong. One of the great things about cricket is you have to adapt.
Yes.
So it's not like if you were to go to an indoor sports arena, the atmosphere and the surface stays the same, whatever.
Yes.
In cricket, you could play on something with a lot of grass, which is green, something very dry, something that bounces a lot, something which is very slow, something which offers a lot of spin, or something which is fantastic for batters, so you get a run fest. you know, from game to game, it can vary so significantly, and that's when different people. So I might be a fast bowler, and the wicket might be great for me one day. Another game, it might be a slow turner, and you as a spinner might really come into it. I might not bowl again at all.
Yeah.
So cricket is about adapting to your circumstances, and particularly if you play cricket abroad. So I've had the fortune of, you know, going to places like South Africa, Zimbabwe, India. You have to adapt your style and your approach to the surfaces and the environment and the climate there. And that's one of the beauties of the game, is that, you know, you can have so many different skills within a team that are used at different times in a cricket situation. So I wouldn't want cricket to become so uniform that it just becomes, you know, you get a certain style of play all the time, because the various conditions do give you different types of games and different experiences.
Which country which you have played cricket in did you have to make the most adaptations to your game?
Probably India, because it was so hot, and also the ball gets roughed up so quickly, because the outfield, you know, we get very used to the lush green grass of playing in the UK, but out there the outfields are very dry, and the ball will rough up very quickly.
Okay.
So the idea as a quick bowler of reverse swing and doing different things to get some lateral movement comes into play more so there. So probably India.
Okay. What was your favourite country you played in?
It was, I don't know, quite a few. Probably India has the most memories, because it's the greatest. It was so different to what I was used to. So, and the crowd is so responsive, because they absolutely love cricket out there. So, if you're doing well, you know, you get applauded, and you know, that was quite a thing, playing cricket in India. Yeah.
And what about which country were you most successful in terms of your performances?
Oh, I don't know. Not sure really. I mean, I only went on relatively brief tours, so I didn't spend whole winters over there. So I've played most of my cricket here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we'll go back to you. So you started playing cricket at a young age. You worked your way through. You got to university. You played a bit of minor counties cricket. Where did you sort of go from that point to then ending up playing cricket for Surrey and Glamorgan?
So it was a bit of a convoluted story, because I had a few trials, but I never came up through any youth system, so I never played any representative cricket.
Okay, that's quite unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, and I sort of learned to play the hard way through clubs and with men, and growing up in that situation. But in the Birmingham League then, it was a closed league. You had the whole of the Worcester and the Warwickshire, you know, second 11s or the first teamers who weren't playing. So, for example, I remember bowling against the young Graham Hick when he first came from Zimbabwe. No one had ever heard of him. I soon found out he was quite good on the offside. And then I remember playing against the young Alan Donald when he was in the Warwickshire Colts. Thought he could be quite good. So it was that standard of cricket, really, and
very high standard.
That was a fantastic sort of proving ground for me. Then I played for Staffordshire in what was then called the minor counties. I had a few trials, but I sort of didn't go anywhere, because I wasn't. You're not playing full time. You're not really that fit. I wasn't that fit. So I gave the idea up until late summer when I was 24. Surrey phoned me up. Jeff Arnold, the former England and Surrey bowler, they'd got some injuries. Would I play? I played a few games for their twos, and I told my work, because their work had been very accommodating up till then, that I'd given the idea up. So I quietly went off and played these games. Did all right. They offered me a contract, and so at the fairly old age of 25, I then joined Surrey. Which is a lot later than most people will when they went into the game. So I had 2 really formative years of playing at the Oval, playing alongside people like Alex Stewart, Graham Thorpe, and Sylvester Clarke, and people of that ilk, which was fantastic. Ian Gregg was the captain, who's the brother of Tony Gregg, who was an England captain previously. And then towards the end of those 2 years, they didn't renew my contract, but Glamorgan were interested. But at that time, I had a bit of a purple patch because Surrey had lots of injuries, and I played in the first team all the way to the end of that season, and got some wickets, which gave me a lot of personal confidence. And then I moved to Wales in 1990 and joined Glamorgan, and that was the year that Viv Richards joined Glamorgan as well. So that was fantastic playing alongside Viv. And then I had a really good 2 years. I played in the first team most of the time. Ended up getting my cap, which was great. But to play with people like Viv and Matt Maynard and people like that, it was a really a team on the rise coming through. And in that decade, then the team won quite a few trophies and medals along the way. So that brought me to Wales.
I've got to ask you a question. It might seem a bit weird, but so a friend of mine was telling me the other week that if Colin Metson could bat, he would have played for England, because he said basically he was such a good wicketkeeper that his only thing which sort of held him back was batting. Would you agree with that sentiment?
You need to be careful here because I still keep in touch with Colin. So he was an amazing keeper, absolutely.
Yeah. Someone I base my keeping game on.
Just watching him, anticipate as much as take the catches and that. He was a brilliant keeper, and probably if he'd batted higher at the Glamorgan order, you'd have had more of a chance of playing for England. I mean, there were a lot of really good keepers at that time. People like Paul Downton and Jack Richards of Surrey. So there were a lot of really good keepers. Jack Russell, another one. So, but possibly.
Yeah, no. I used just it was a weird that it just popped into my head after I was having a conversation with someone the other day on Jack Russell. Funny enough, I watched. Someone sent me a clip yesterday of him standing up for England against. I think it's Alan Mullally, but it might be someone else. But it's a genuine quick bowler, and he stood up because of the pitch being a bit low, and he's putting a bit of pressure on the batsman. And some of the takes that he takes down the leg side off the quick bowlers is just astounding. It's easy to forget all these years later how good a wicketkeeper he was. Simply sensational. And have you seen his art? He's very good.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Unbelievable.
Well, yeah.
And but he's a sensational keeper. And as someone who, I used to really enjoy standing up as a wicketkeeper, particularly to some of the sort of quicker bowlers rather than the spinners. I know how difficult it is, and I was sort of saying to my son, and he was like, my son was just sort of saying, he's just catching it, and I was like, it's not quite as easy as just catching it.
It's coming at 90-95 miles an hour, and moving a lot in the air to adjust.
So it's the footwork, the head work, keeping your head still, everything. Just he's special keeper. Who do you think? Who's the best player you've played with, who perhaps didn't go on and play for England or their country?
I've not really thought of that, to be honest.
Because you've obviously played with a lot of sensational cricketers over the years, so I'm kind of interested if there's one which sort of pops out and who's was really, really good but never really got their chance.
I don't know. I think of a few of my Glamorgan colleagues at the time who played a little bit for England, and probably if they played early would have a longer run in. So someone like Steve James, who should have played a lot more than he did.
Scored so many runs for Glamorgan, didn't he?
Steve Watkin was such a good bowler. Seeing him, bowl at the other end, he was a fantastic, partner to bowl with. So reliable, so effective a bowler. Always take wickets, and probably people like that, if they'd had a chance a little bit earlier, might have played a lot longer than they did. But I'll have to come back to you on that other question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I always felt like maybe it was a bit of sort of bias and youth. But I remember in my teens always being frustrated that Glamorgan players didn't seem to get the same chances that other county players did. Maybe, like I said, I was very young, but I always felt like Matt Maynard would come in for a little bit and then he'd be out quite quickly. The only one really who kind of broke that sort of cycle I've been in and then out was probably Robert Croft, Steve James, Steve Watkin. You know, they would get a chance and wouldn't really, like, when you look at Steve James's record over the years at Glamorgan, you'd think he should have played more international
There's
cricket.
quite a few people like that. You look at someone like Hugh Morris, you know, he played, possibly could have played more as well. So that argument about, you know, the home counties has always been long held. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But it's tough. You know, it's tough to get to that level.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of people trying to do it.
Yeah, and I think there's at that time as well when, you know, Steve James was around, England did have some very, very good openers in, you know, Mike Afton and Mark Butcher and these kind of, Alex Stewart did a bit of opening as well.
Yeah.
So there was, you know, it wasn't like they were struggling for openers, shall we say. So did you move down to Wales because you were moving to Glamorgan, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Was that a big decision for you in terms of coming down here or up here, down here?
Yeah, it was, yeah. It was, I'd just got engaged as well.
Oh, okay.
And then we soon got married, and my wife was from Surrey, so she moved over. So it was quite a big investment for us both to come here, but we loved the place, and, you know, we've stayed ever since. We've pretty much lived in Penarth all the time that we've been here, and children have been born and bred here, so they passionately feel themselves as Welsh, much to the chagrin of my wife. But yeah, it's been great living here, so really enjoyed what Cardiff and the greater area has to offer in terms of the environment and the accessibility, and it's just been fantastic, really.
Yeah. I mean, you're not the first person I've spoken to recently, actually, who said they came down to Cardiff or Wales for, you know, a job or a career move, and then never left because they enjoyed it and they loved it so much. And whether it's the people, the area, or a combination of everything. Viv Richards, tell me about the man.
Well, he was amazing. I remember Alan Butcher was the captain at the time, introduced me to him, and I thought, well, like, you need to. I know who he is, you know. But he instilled so much confidence in people. He was 40 when he joined Glamorgan, so he was obviously past his absolute prime, but he would walk out and change games. He was quite a useful bowler as well. He was a brilliant fielder, not just in the slips but in the covers as well. Okay. And, you know, he obviously would challenge bowlers as well, because bowlers knew they were bowling at one of the legends of cricket. And he would turn it on in the big games where it needed to be done. I mean, there was obviously that fantastic final at Canterbury, but the one game that I remember a lot was a game at Hampshire, which has been chronicled quite a few times. David Gower was playing, Malcolm Marshall was bowling for them, a guy you don't really want to be 20 yards at the other end from. No. But Viv ended up scoring something like 160 odd to win a game that we probably would have lost. And he hit something like 13 or 14 off Malcolm and in the last over, which is quite something. You know, he was one of the world's best bowlers. You know. And the two umpires came off after the game, and they made a comment. And these are people who'd played forever and umpired forever, and they said to Viv that was the best innings they'd ever seen. And I was sitting in the corner, feeling really humble, thinking, "Wow, that is quite some statement."
Yeah.
You know. But to play with him was fantastic, and you know he would, of course, he knew so many great cricketers, people like Botham, you know, and it was always good when we played Worcester or later on Durham when Botham moved to Durham. In fact, I've got quite a nice little entry in one of the scorecards where I came on to bowl at the end of a one-day game up in Durham, and Botham came in, and I tried to bowl a Yorker but not very well, so we hit it right up in the air. I thought, oh no, it's one of those where it's gone miles up, and Viv was just to my left, and he shouted, "Mine!" You know, he was definitely going to take this. Yeah. So he took the catch. So I thought that's quite a nice one in the scorebook to have.
Absolutely.
So, but you know, he was brilliant. It reminded me as I would run into bowl, there'd be Colin Metson keeping wicket and Viv at first slip. And he was a great big bloke, he had big shoulders. And that's the memory I had of him, like in the 1970s against Leon Thompson. In those years of the West Indies when in their pomp, when he would be at first slip to the likes of Holding and Roberts and Garner and co. So no, it was fantastic to have had that opportunity to play alongside him. Really.
What was he like off the pitch? Was he quite sociable and someone who could be approachable to everyone?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, sometimes people made a lot of demands of him, but
of course,
he was really accommodating. He would sign as much as he can. Very, very engaging. He's a very passionate man. He's very passionate about the quality of the game. So from a Black Afro-Caribbean point of view, he had that perspective on life, and he challenged a lot of the then hierarchy around how things were and how we're presented. So, he obviously, whilst he was playing for the West Indies, used that to champion, equality within sport and within cricket. And that's a really strong subject for me now, because that's, an area I'm trying to drive here in Wales at the same time. So, yeah, but proudly passionate about his roots and his background. But when he came to Wales, he fully became immersed and gave his everything. He throw himself around and do everything. So it was a great experience for the 3 seasons he played.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't realise he was. I knew he was in the sort of latter parts of his career. I didn't realise that he was 40 when he came here.
Yeah.
So, and he was still throwing himself around.
And he could still play.
Yeah, I bet. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. After your playing career, what was the plan for you once you sort of stopped playing professional cricket? What was your plan, and did you stick to the plan, or did you go off into different directions?
Not sure I had one really. It was a funny period. I had about 4 or 5 months where I was looking for work, because I decided to retire because of a bad back, and I was letting the team down more often than not.
Okay.
So I finished, and you never know when that's going to be, so you can't really plan too hard for these things. Although I'd always worked in the winters in what you might call a proper job, as opposed to playing sport. But I was fortunate to get a role with what was then called the Sports Council for Wales, now Sport Wales. And I worked in the team that connected with all the governing bodies of sport in Wales. So I worked there for a bit. I then came back to lead on cricket development across Wales for what was then called the Cricket Board of Wales, a fairly newly formed organisation. Then I worked back for Sport Wales again, looking after all the funding of all the sports and all the local authorities. So I was finding that my area of work was very much around getting people playing sport, particularly around grassroots participation. And now I've been working back in this joint role across both Glamorgan and Cricket Wales, where I am responsible for all the grassroots work across Wales, all the club work, the training of coaches, getting more children, adults to pick up a bat and ball across the teams that we've got across Wales. So I've been fortunate enough to be in sports management ever since I finished playing, which has been great, and half of that time within the cricket world as well. But there's some fantastic things going on in Wales, and the 100 is a small example of some of the growth that's going on in the game, particularly around women and girls. Clubs becoming more diverse and hopefully more inclusive, so they're a bit more representative of the communities that they are in. And so that's where I found myself, really. So I'm not sure there was a plan, but it's evolved that way.
Yeah, indeed. With the women's side of things, like, I just really interested, because obviously my memory now of grassroots cricket is very much going back to early 2000s, really, because that's the last time I was involved in it, week to week and day to day and things like that. I wonder, how it's changed, because obviously I think at that point there was just starting to be, you know, girls teams in the younger age group. So I played at RADA, and there was, I think they were just starting to get some girls teams and things like that. Like how much of a evolution has there been since, say, you know, sort of 2005 to now, in terms of, say, in Cardiff, how many of the league clubs have girls teams, women's teams?
Well, most
things
of
like
them.
that?
Most of them, yeah.
Have they got women's teams as well?
Yeah, that's right. Most
That's
most
awesome.
clubs in this area now have a women's and a girls team. So a lot of women have come into the game in their mature years through a softball version of it. So it's a bit like quick cricket. We may have played pairs cricket in the past, where you play 2 or 3 overs as a pair, and then the next pair come in, and if you're out, you lose 5 or 6 runs or something like that. But that very social, engaging, equal type of game was driven 6 or 7 years ago, a softball rubber version of the game, and it absolutely took off. So lots and lots of clubs were finding that women linked to the club, either through the cricketers or through their children, took up the sport, and now there are tiers of competition now. So you've got still that social entry level. You've got now competitive softball cricket leagues across both South and North Wales, and then above that you've got hardball cricket, where not so many are playing, but those are the ones that are vying to play for Wales, and of the younger cricketers, you know, to be the future professional cricketers, you know, playing for the likes of Western Storm or Welsh Fire, as we've just been experiencing. So, and there's a really clear structure and pathway now for girls to see, because they can see that there's there's an end game now.
Yeah, absolutely.
To put all that effort in. There's no guarantees like anything,
No.
but it's so much more competitive now. For those that are picking representative teams, there's such much broader base of girls to choose from. So it's been fantastic to see, and one of the messages that we encourage clubs that perhaps haven't picked this up is that becoming more diverse is better for you. It's not just a political thing, it's not a box ticking thing, although sometimes I'm accused of box ticking. But it's actually better for clubs to have a more rounded demographic and more balanced gender distribution across its members, because you're bringing in new ideas, new money, new thoughts and innovative ideas as to how the club can run in the future. And that's been fantastic for so many clubs. So at that level, that's been brilliant. So the other big success factor since 2017 has been All-Stars cricket and latterly Dynamos cricket. So All-Stars is the entry point to 5 to 8 year olds. Typically clubs will run that on a Friday night, and it's absolutely escalated from a few to many. And we've got several clubs for whom to have 150, 200 kids just in that age group is a normal thing, and it's transformed them massively. So every child brings 2 parents and a sibling. So suddenly that connectivity with their communities, more people involved in the club, has been a fantastic transformative process for so many cricket clubs. So and our main challenge now is to, as they grow up and as they become 9, 10, 11, 12, to have enough teams, organised teams for them to play in, which involves recruiting more volunteers and training them. So All-Stars cricket and its next step, Dynamos cricket, have been amazing. So those are the 2 big success factors in grassroots cricket, and they've changed the game significantly in the last 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, those children, their families, their siblings, they're the future of those clubs, because, you know, the people who are playing for those clubs now, they can't play forever. They can't be volunteers forever. And I think it's the same in all sport, you know, at grassroots level, these football clubs, cricket clubs, they're all run ultimately by volunteers. Yeah. So you need diverse ideas, people and things like that. You need as many members as possible, because you need to keep having volunteers to run
Yeah,
to run the clubs.
And sport, and particularly cricket, has been so powerful for people's personal well-being. So coming out of COVID, people appreciated what they'd missed by not playing cricket and having that natural interaction on the field, not just playing the game, but that chatting while you're waiting to bat or chatting at the fall of a wicket, all that sort of stuff. And what we've found for a lot of clubs on a Friday night, all these young people starting the game and making friends, making friendships, because they're not just come for the session and go, like it does happen with a lot of situations in sport, but they're staying after because mum and dad have bought a picnic, or there's a bit of a food offer, or they're having a little drink afterwards. The kids are socialising, the parents are socialising, and it's become a big evening, and the whole family come along.
Yeah.
And because the whole family are coming along, girls particularly are seeing this is a game for me. This isn't just a dads on lads thing.
Yeah.
The whole game involved, and the more mums that are starting to play as well, suddenly you've got lots and lots of examples where literally a whole family are involved in volunteering, playing, coaching, participating in the game on a Friday night or sometime on the weekend. That's incredible. Been a really healthy outcome in the last 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, as we were talking just before we started, but I mean, as someone who was heavily involved in playing and, was relatively young at the time, still in my 20s, someone who was, played cricket every week, all summer, from, age 9 really up into my 20s, and then obviously from probably 15 upwards, when I was playing the men's cricket, I would stay behind and I'd stay and have a non-alcoholic drink with the other players and stuff like that. And as I got older and that social side of it was massive for me. My father died when I was 16. There's a group of guys at Rada Cricket Club who literally kept me involved, which was a massive thing for me at that point, because I was at a bit of a crossroads in terms of I could have easily stopped going because my mum wasn't really involved in it. It was more my dad. So if those guys like Carl Norman and John Wilson hadn't just kept a bit of an eye on me and said, come on, I'll take you to training, or I'll take you to the game on Saturday, I probably would have veered off away from it. And you don't know. And then I've had the other side of it, whereby since 2008, where I had a car accident, I had it taken away from me. Yeah. And I missed that sort of social side of it, because I find it quite difficult to go and... I went down and watched RADA a couple of times, and I found it really difficult because...
You wanted to...
Yeah, you want to play and stuff like that. Yeah. But I did have a brief conversation with Phil Haynes probably a month ago. I asked him about some disabled cricket in Cardiff and stuff like that. But I'm very, I don't know what the word is, apprehensive, I guess, about it and broaching it and things like that. But it's an idea, I suppose.
It's a bit of umpiring or coaching or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, and this is the frustrating thing for me, is that I think if I still played, I'm pretty sure my kids would all play. Yeah. 3 boys, they were all, even if they weren't boys, but I mean, they're all, particularly, the older and the youngest, are quite sporty. Yeah. And I think if I played every week, they'd have watched and could have graduated from that. But I was going to ask you, so obviously for if you take out the representative side, so like county and stuff like that, for me, when I was playing for RADA, say it would have been, I'd have played like kids cricket in my different age groups, and then because I was all right at it, I think I started playing men's cricket at about 13, 14, and as I got older and better, I gradually went up through the teams. Will there be a similar pathway for girls with, say, like those village teams, whereby they'll play through their age groups and then go to like the women's senior team, or is it slightly different because of numbers?
Still growing and evolving. So the state of girls junior club cricket is still developing as numbers grow of teams evolving. So that either standalone girls leagues or girls playing with boys in junior leagues grows and grows. But there will come that time when we've got lots of girls are now basically good enough and old enough to play senior cricket. So they'll either play with a lot of blokes that currently play on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, or will want to play women's only cricket, and I can only see that is the area that's going to really grow. So one of our challenges of the future, we're thinking a lot about the facilities that we've got in Wales, and there will be a lot of
my next question.
there will be a lot of pinch points on, particularly on a Sunday afternoon where the club has got a cup game, but the women's team, they've got a home game, and who's going to play where?
Yeah.
So the installation of non-turf pitches, clever use of ground sharing, all these type of things. You know, we've mapped out that we've got some pretty growing hotspots of a surfeit of demand over the supply of pitches at the moment, particularly in Cardiff. That's certainly the case with things like the midweek leagues that exist. There's a lot of demand to play. Haven't quite got enough pitches to accommodate everyone all at the same time.
Yeah, so I suppose you have to be inventive then, don't you? Like you say, midweek leagues and ground sharing and things like that. The other question I had about the kind of evolution of that is, did you have pushback from the kind of village clubs? Because obviously, certainly going back to when I was last there, a lot of these grounds have only got one set of changing rooms. So obviously, if there's like a teenage girl, say, who's very good, so she's going to play for the men's first or second team because there's not a women's team. Yeah. How did you have pushback in teams in terms of, well, we've only got men's changing rooms, and because obviously they've got to then find the funding to create a separate changing rooms and things like that. It's just, I guess I'm interested in how clubs accommodate it, but also if there was a bit of pushback in your push for equality and to get more girls and women involved.
So one of the straplines, so to speak, of our diversity inclusion strategy is that we want people to feel welcome when they come to a cricket club, and that they feel at home. Whether that's the physical, social welcome, that people actually speak to them and they feel welcome like that, or the facilities are appropriate for just the situation that you just described. And for a lot of cricket clubs, the latter, they're not. Most cricket clubs haven't caught up with the changes in the game. And it's quite challenging to do it. You can't just build,
extra changing room or...
There's a lot of hurdles in the way of providing more accommodation. And people are getting around it by coming changed, and COVID's helps in that sense, in that, when we were coming back from COVID, we all came changed and we all left unchanged, there were no showers. So, and an important part of all this discussion is safeguarding, so the appropriate ways that cricket is run, particularly where you've got mixed gender or different generations of young people and adults playing in the same game. But that's one of the beauties of the game, that you can have different ethnicities in the game, and cricket has a rich history, and it's becoming even more diverse. You have different genders in the game and different generations in the game. I played in the game the other day where I opened the bowling against one of the Welsh women's opening batters, and then after a few overs I came off, and a 13-year-old lad from Penarth, spin bowler, came on, who's got Indian ethnicity. He came on, and so there was, I know you'd never believe this, but I'm 60 now, okay? So 60-year-old, 13-year-old, man, boy, woman, all playing in the same game. It's just normal.
Amazing,
And nobody was batting any eyelids at all. So, all that rich diversity of what cricket can do. When I was growing up, I played with some fantastic cricketers, the likes of Joey Benjamin, before he went to Surrey and played for England. Dean Headley, who played for England, his dad Ron, and I played with so many different people from an Indian, Pakistani, South African, West Indian, particularly West Indian background, that it actually playing alongside people from different ethnicities was the norm for me. Different genders wasn't a norm then when I was growing up. Now it's much so the case, and cricket clubs are evolving, and the more progressive ones are really doing that very well.
Good. That's what I like to hear. So to kind of finish us off, I'd like to hear a little bit about the author that is not Mark Frost. But before we do, you mentioned when you went to university, you went to do geography.
Yeah.
So you didn't go to do, writing or creative writing or English or something like that. So how did Mark Frost, the cricketer, become an author and a different name? And why the different name?
So I'd always wrote, whether it's short stories or articles about the game and other things, a bit of poetry as well, but never really got anywhere with it. And then back in 2007, we went on a family holiday. We've got 4 children, and we were quite young at the time. I had a week in Paris and a week in the Dordogne, and I normally keep a little diary of the things that go on holiday. And one of my sons, Nathan, we stopped in a service station on the way down the M4, and he got lost. Lost child scenario.
As kids do.
Yeah. And then we got on the ferry, and he got lost on the ferry. Okay. So when I was writing that up that night in the diary, I thought, what if there was something more subversive going on here? And then the next day we went to the Louvre, and we saw the Mona Lisa and everything. And then when we had that week in the Dordogne, we met some. We stayed in a fantastic place. We met some amazing people, and all this suddenly found its way. I thought I was just using all these places and people in a way. So I ended up self-publishing a novel, which was called The Four, which is because we got 4 kids. So it was about us as a family on holiday, but it was described as a sort of if there was a romantic liaison between Ian Fleming and Enid Blyton, this would be it. And it was pretty far-fetched, but that's the sort of stuff I wanted to write. So the 4 kids get into trouble, they witness a robbery, they get separated from mum and dad, they're on the run from the baddies and the police, and they're helped by some strange people that they meet along the way. So, and then I finished it, but I hadn't, and I thought, there's too many loose ends here. So I kept the threads going, using other family holidays in different parts of the world, and friends and people I knew that might possibly found their way into those stories. And then I ended up writing three books.
Amazing.
But at the time, the publishing, well, it wasn't the self-publishing house suggested I didn't use my name because there's a really well-known American author called Mark Frost. And so often when in my early days of cricket, people would call me Jack because of my surname.
Of course.
And my grandfather's middle name was Emson, so I just put the 2 together and used Jack Emson as a name. Yeah. I probably didn't need to because I was probably deluded in that I thought I was going to sell lots of books, which I didn't really quite do. And then since then I've written 2 short stories largely around my work at Glamorgan. So all year round we have school trips come in on stadium tours where they go into changing rooms, they play, they go in the media centre, and they're generally wowed by the beauty of the stadium. Even on a dull November day, it's an impressive place to be. And so I wrote a short story about a primary school in the Rhondda, who make a trip and they end up playing in a festival and they end up playing in the summer on the main ground itself with other schools. And there are some shameless references to people that I've known or still know in there. Slightly changed the names, but they're all there to be seen. And I did a follow-up story to that one as well. So So the first one of those is called Derry and the Cricket Dragon, and the second one is around the scenario. It was just before COVID, actually. COVID hadn't hit, but it was the scenario that a big company took over Sapphire Gardens and closed it down, and it went, weeds were growing out the gates and everything like that. So it was that type of thing. So I haven't put that one out on for e-distribution yet, but I think I'll have to do that in some case. If someone likes it, maybe I'll get it published.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed the whole storytelling bit of it, and it very much linked back to bedtime stories with my kids. I would tell them the same story time and time again in different ways, but I would make it up as I went along.
Yeah,
and with these stories, a lot of it was like I had a sort of rough idea where I was going, but I like that inventiveness of where am I going with this,
Yeah.
What's the next bit? I didn't quite know half the time. And when the kids were little, one of my sons, my oldest son Jacob, rumbled me because I was telling them this bedtime story, and I said, and then Simon was on the edge of the cliff, and I'll tell you the rest of it tomorrow. And I did that too many times for him to say, Dad, you don't actually know what the rest of the story is. You're just going, aren't you? So he rumbled me. But no, I just enjoyed that. Where can the story go?
Yeah.
But you can only write about what you know. So people you've met, particularly places that you've been to, and hopefully some of that emotion comes through there as well.
Awesome. Do you think we'll see another book from you?
Hopefully. I'm working one at the moment about a rather hapless 50, 60-year-old guy who gets challenged to steal something, but with a good reason to do it, not just for personal benefit. But I haven't quite worked out what that is yet.
Okay.
Because I always enjoy a good heist story, a good
heist
film, so I quite like to do one like that, but more comedic than anything, I think.
What was the response from your kids to your books?
Well, anything Dad does is slightly embarrassing anyway,
of course.
so it's not cool to like what your dad does, but they were all mentioned in there, so I think they'll probably come to like it in future years, so rather than at the time.
Yeah.
So
I bet you they read them to their kids.
they probably will do. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Where would you like? So obviously with your job with the cricket and expanding that kind of equality into grassroots sport and things now, in 5 years, in the perfect world, what changes would you like to have implemented, and where would you like to see that be?
Two things really. I was talking recently to a chap called Nick Pride, who's just finishing at the England and Wales Cricket Board, leading on participation, and in the last few months there's been a really significant report for cricket on equality, on equity. And it's been very challenging for cricket, but it's been a subject that I've been working, and all my colleagues in Glamorgan and Cricket Wales have been working hard on, which is that point about making the game a game for everyone, a game where people feel welcome, they feel at home, and not words which are box ticking, but actual practical realities of making sure that cricket is inclusive of and representative of the community it exists in. So that's a massive area of work, and there's lots to be done. And this recent report, whilst it's a UK-wide one, was hard-hitting. So there's a lot of work to do. We've made some progress, but there's still a lot more to be done. So that's an area that actually, in 5 years' time, as cricket embedded the whole concept of equality, the whole concept of inclusivity in every cricket club. That's a big challenge, and that's a lot around behaviour change as well as changing rooms. So that's one big area. But the other big goal is around ambition. So I've seen in my own club in Penarth, I'm the chair of that club, so if I'm not working in cricket, I'm volunteering in cricket. And I've tried to walk the talk in terms of the the initiatives that we've had in cricket. So we've got the biggest All Stars and Dynamos section in Wales, second biggest in the UK, and it's been a fantastic experience for the club. And not every club has woken up to that idea of having such a big scale of activity that has brought so many others in. It's not quite worked through to adults, but it's caused the profile of the club to expand. More people want to play in the adult teams as well. We've got girls cricket for the first time in the last 2 years, which has been brilliant. And it's that scale of ambition I would love more and more clubs to have. I can see it in certain other chairs of clubs where they really want to be a big, powerful, significant club. And I suppose enviously, over the years with my own kids playing sport, mainly soccer and rugby, that Saturday, Sunday morning of grounds teeming with kids playing rugby or soccer, I want that to be commonplace for cricket, so that on a summer Saturday morning or a Friday night, there are millions of kids running around playing cricket, millions of parents there enjoying it as well. And I'd love that to be commonplace for all cricket clubs in Wales, not just 10 or 15 of them. So those two areas really are my passions for the future.
Excellent. I'd look, it's exceptional things to want at the end of the day, isn't it? It's going to make things better for everyone.
Yeah.
So I like that a lot. It's not about personal gain, it's about everyone.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Mark, it's been a genuine pleasure and an honour, I've got to be honest. I really enjoyed it. It's been a good fun chat. I can talk cricket all the time anyway, so I'm quite happy with that. But no, it's been fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Cheers, Simon.
And I will also drop links to your books in the description below, as and Glamorgan cricket. We'll stick there as well. Anything else you want me to put in there, I'll put in there too. But guys, thank you very much for joining us. And as always, please do subscribe and like all that good stuff. And we'll be back next week for another episode. Thank you very much.
Everything closed this late, but your contact. Here to catch a vibe, you might catch a little contact. Only thing showing this late be the freak show. Call for your cum, I be checking through the peephole. Everything closed this late, but your contact. Here to catch a vibe, you might catch a little contact. Baby, live it up, you know the work week coming. Turn it into profit, so the hurt means something. Shine on the competition, shawty, that's easy. Cupid on the collar, so the next day freezy. Fresh white tee, ain't good, no stains. Swinging in the rental, got it hogging both lanes. Quarantine clean, but the streets still dirty. Round to the 9 if it's past 8:30. I've been on my grind like I'm tryna get sharp. It ain't come with keys, all I did is hit start. I ain't even planned it, but a nigga hit still. Car full of baddies, got me playing fifth wheel. Juke jammer, baby, got the party going up. I do what I wanna, I don't plan on growing up. See you slamming Henny and don't plan on slowing up. Call your boss and tell him you don't plan on showing up. Lungs full of gas with a handful of goals. Boys in a band, get a band for the shows. Stack it up tall till I stand on my toes. Come and get your man, he'll stand for the hoes. I been on M's, got 'em hopping on D. Tell the bartender, get it popping on me. Know they see the vibe and I came up quick. See around the city on the same old shit. I been really working and it's steady, got me buzzing. I been getting money, now I'm everybody cousin. Waffle House run and it's back to the bed. Hit it from the back, pulling tracks from your head. Only thing showing this late be the freak show. Call for your cum, I be checking through the peephole.